Hello, everyone.
Hello.
We're back.
Hi.
This is actually our third take because the first time I wasn't prepared, the second time my phone died, and now here we are again. So, okay. So we're going to get into what is transverse myelitis.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Please explain in layman's terms.
So essentially, transverse myelitis is a disorder caused by inflammation in the spinal cord. It's characterized by neurological symptoms, neurologic dysfunction in motor and sensory tracts on both sides of the spinal cord. So I've had to do a lot of research to really understand it. And so I'm going to tell you guys how I understand the terminology. So transverse is describes where the inflammation of the spinal cord is, and it's transverse because the inflammation crosses over the spinal cord. It is on both sides of the spinal cord. The myelitis refers to your myelin sheath, and your myelin sheath is the actual cord that covers your nerves in your spinal cord. So it is the myelin that gets inflamed, and then that is what causes the damage to the nerves. For me specifically, my inflammation was in my cervical spine. So you have four parts to your spine. You have your cervical, which is your neck. You have your thoracic, which is like your ribs. Then you have your lumbar, which is where your back curves, your natural curvature of your spine. And then you have your coccyx tailbone. And so in your cervical spine, you have 7 vertebrae. And they're called C1, C2, C3, down to 7. So my inflammation was from my C2 to my C7. So essentially the full cervical spine besides the first vertebrae.
Okay.
So as far as my specific diagnosis, when they first came in after the MRI, they told me you have transverse myelitis or acute transverse myelitis.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I came out of the hospital and rehab and I went to my first neurology appointment with my neurologist, he was explaining that I have acute idiopathic transverse myelitis.
Okay. And what does that mean?
So idiopathic means that there's no known cause. It's just a fancy term of saying we don't know why this happened to you.
Mm.
And that is with, I would say, most cases of transverse myelitis. And the way that they figure out how you got transverse myelitis is one of the ways is through a spinal tap. And so I did have a spinal tap in the hospital, but there was nothing in my spinal fluid to prove to them that, they didn't find any infection in the spinal fluid to say, oh, bam, that is why this happened.
Right.
I have my theory of why it happened, and we'll get into that another time.
Yeah.
But there's no proof. And so without proof, there is no known cause.
Yeah.
So, and there's also, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I'll just put this in. There's also no cure for transverse myelitis. So because they don't know what the root cause is. So because there's no cure and they don't know the root cause, they can only treat the symptoms. And so I will talk more about that when I talk about what my symptoms are on a daily basis. Okay,
So how do you get it?
So there's several ways to get it. You can get it from vaccines. You can get it from a viral or a bacterial infection in your body. You can get it from if you have an autoimmune disease, like lupus or or I have a hard time, scrogens. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I don't think I am.
That's all right.
But yeah, so those are the main ways that you can get
Actually get it.
I know, I'm in a Transverse Myelitis Facebook group, and so I've seen, some people say, oh, I got it from the flu shot. Some people say, maybe they just got a cortisone shot and it happens. I think there was a woman that said, I just had the common cold. Yeah. And so it's, it's kind of all over the map. In terms of like viral and bacterial infections, it's like, well, that could be anything, right?
Yeah.
But it is very, very rare.
Very rare.
Extremely rare.
Yeah.
So I did a little research just to give you guys an idea of how rare it actually is. About 33,000 people in the United States have transverse myelitis, and about 1,400 new cases a year are diagnosed. And so I just put in, just put some things into Google. So kidney disease in the United States, there are 37 million people living with kidney disease.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. Breast cancer is 3.8 million women in the United States. And type 1 diabetes is 1.6 million people in the United States. So when you think about those numbers and you put that next to 33,000 people, you really get a picture of just how rare this disorder is.
Yeah.
And you'll also hear me refer to it as a disorder, a disease. Sometimes I say an illness. I really do think it's a disorder. My neurologist tells me I have a spinal cord disease. He's just like, that's the basics. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But for me, I feel way more like I have a disorder than an actual disease.
Disease, right.
Yeah. And so it is categorized as a neurological dysfunction or disease. However, there is the nonprofit that raises money for transverse myelitis. There's about 6 other disorders, and multiple sclerosis is one of them. And they're actually categorized as a Neuro-Immuno disease because, and this is, I guess, what I should have said when I was describing transverse myelitis, is that what happens is you have an infection in your body of any kind, and instead of your immune system attacking that infection, it attacks your spine instead.
Wow.
Yeah. So like that's really the crux of it. Like that's, it's just it gets mixed up a little bit and attacks your spine instead of going to work to attack the infection that's in your body. So I think that's all we had on the docket today. Short and sweet, I hope.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how sweet, but we're sweet.
Yes. And very informative.
Yes. It was informative, I hope. So we will see you tomorrow, and I'm so excited.
Bye.
Bye.